Replacing six seniors is a pretty daunting task for Mike Rhoades and this Penn State men's basketball team, but the future actually looks a lot brighter than it might seem.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State men's basketball. Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. That is Zane Brancefield over on the other side, correspondent, Penn State men's basketball correspondent to the podcast, also covers basketball for Penn State Rivals. Link to his work will be down in the description. Zane, Penn State lost another close game. Stop me if you've heard that one before. But the season, yes, looks like it's coming to an end, and we'll address what to expect from the Nittany Lions in these final two games. But I think it's important to look ahead to the future here, because I don't think it's as bad as people might make it out to be. I mean, losing five seniors is a big deal. And this was a solid group, even if this season did not live up to the expectations. But I actually like what the future has in store for Penn State men's basketball. They're getting a stud in Kayden Mingo with this freshman class. I say don't sleep on Mason Blackwood either. He's also the other true freshman in this class of 2025. And then Penn State's going to be active in the transfer portal. Pat Kraft said that he feels confident in Mike Rhoades. So Penn State men's basketball really has nowhere else to go but up from here.
Yeah, definitely nowhere else to go from up. And like you said, you're losing actually six seniors because Puff Johnson's been hurt too. But
yes,
there's a lot of upside, as you mentioned, going forward. Kayden Mingo is a guy that people need to start knowing now. He's a guy, he essentially is a very good, all-around basketball player. He plays a lot of great defense, and he can score three different levels. It honestly kind of reminds me of the similar type of player as Ace Baldwin Jr., but I think he has a higher upside, and I think Penn State fans could start looking at what he can bring to the team, and there's a potential that he could start his first year coming in here.
I fully expect it. If he isn't a starter, then that's a disappointment.
Yeah, highest ranked recruit in Penn State history. The only other high guy was Tony Carr, and Tony Carr started as a freshman when he was at Penn State. So I expect Mingo to do the same thing. Like you said, it'd be kind of a disappointment if he didn't. When you're bringing this kind of talent in and you're losing a lot of guys that were starting, like Ace Baldwin Jr. won't be here, obviously, so Mingo would perfectly fill that gap there. And obviously Javin Carter's on the team as well, but Mingo, I think, has a way higher ceiling, a lot more potential, and already, I think, a higher floor than what Javin Carter has displayed in college basketball. So will Mingo be able to transition to that Big Ten play, college basketball play? We'll have to wait and find out, but he plays some tough competition in his different travel ball in his high school.
Yes.
And it's not like he's playing a bunch of scrubs. So I think there's a lot of upside to see what Mingo's going to do here at Penn State. And frankly, he could be that missing piece for Penn State to take that big step. But Mingo isn't the only guy. You mentioned Mason Blackwood. He reminds me kind of a similar builds like a Nick Kern Jr. Gets a lot of rebounds, pretty good defensively, likes to drive, can shoot better. It's just showing some flashes there. But Penn State is looking in the right direction. Also, Justin Hauser is committed to Penn State.
Yes, he is.
He's a 6'11", 215 center, but there are some worries that he won't be able to adjust to college basketball play, but we'll have to see what happens there. But Penn State's looking in the right direction. They have a good class. They have some young talent. And you mentioned the transfer portal too, and I think that's a big thing to point out is what can they get from the transfer portal. That has been what's turned a lot of programs around the past few seasons, as that's been effective. And it's also hurt some teams, obviously, but Mike Rhoades needs to utilize the transfer portal. And I think everybody knows that you're losing six guys, you're bringing three in, that doesn't math. So you need to bring in at least three players, and they have the ability to fit four on their roster. And so I'm not sure who's going to be available. There's still March Madness, obviously. There's still
of course,
two regular season games, so we can't say, they need to go get this player. But if Mike Rhoades doesn't get solid role player, solid talent, I would see even at least another star player then the next season kind of looks a little bit more frustrating for fans.
I really don't know how much more. I get what you're saying, Zane, and I agree with you to an extent. I just don't know how much more frustrating it can get, right? Because this team had March Madness potential. That is okay to say, but at the end, I was wrong. A lot of college basketball experts were wrong. They put so much stock into this team, so that's why I say they really have nowhere else to go but up. And Kayden Mingo is a phenomenal start to next season. He is the face of this team. I know that's lofty expectations for a true freshman, but this guy is the best overall recruit in Penn State men's basketball history. Objectively, a top 50 consensus player and has NBA potential. So to compare him to Tony Carr might be a slight disservice because I think Kayden Mingo has a higher ceiling than that's the immediate comparison. I don't even think Ace Baldwin is a fair comparison. I think you got to go beyond, and that it's Tony Carr and the impact that Carr had in 2 seasons. Mingo could be even better than that. He's not going to be somebody that stays for 3 to 4 years, and I guess in the scheme of things, that might be a good thing because that means he's off to the NBA because something went right in his development. That's the way that I see Kayden Mingo. And Mason Blackwood, now I won't put that kind of pressure on him, but I do think that he can be somebody that is in the 6 or 7 man rotation. Maybe he even does start because you have Javin Carter, you have Dominic Stewart. Miles Goodman battled injuries. I don't know that he was 100%, right? Stop me if you've heard that one, Zane, that this Penn State men's basketball team dealt with injuries between Ace Baldwin, between Puff Johnson. Miles Goodman never got on the right track in terms of his development because he was one of the best overall recruits in Penn State history from the class before. Oh, and we never even heard from Eli Rice this season because of the season-ending injury that he had to deal with. So Penn State has a really good group of just raw talented players. And if Mike Rhoades can develop him, look at the way they develop Yannick Konan-Niederhauser. So if you question Mike Rhoades and this coaching staff and how they develop players, no, they didn't necessarily win all the games that they should have, but I still saw steps in the right direction that lead me to believe, okay, try to fend off some other programs from trying to push Konan-Niederhauser into the transfer portal. You have superstar potential in Kayden Mingo, Mason Blackwood, who could be a really good player, and then don't forget about Javin Carter, Dominic Stewart, Miles Goodman, Freddie DeLeon. That's at least the potential is there in that nucleus if they can keep it all together.
Yeah, definitely the development of Mike Rhoades. We've seen it too as like he was at VCU. He's had some players go to the NBA, and you said Yannick Konan-Niederhauser. Yannick Konan-Niederhauser has become one of the best big men in the Big Ten the past, especially the past.
And all it took was a half of a season.
And like you said, Miles Goodman. Who's to say Miles Goodman can't be that type of player for Penn State? Bring that type of impact. And like you said, his development was slowed down. And you can be like, oh, injuries happen. Okay, but it still slows down development. No player, you can't be on the basketball court getting better if you're hurt, obviously. So maybe this offseason could be really good for Miles Goodman, see what he can bring. Maybe he can hit that potential that Mike Rhoades saw in him before he recruited him to come to Penn State. Yeah. And Dominic Stewart is another guy I've seen a lot of growth from throughout the season. Mike Rhoades has talked really high of him. And he's just a guy who is pretty athletic. He's great defensively. If you watch, he's always on the ball. He doesn't fill the stat sheet necessarily because he's doing the intangible stuff. But he can play good on-ball defense. He chases rebounds, and I think he's a good guy for Penn State to have in that core moving forward. Is he going to be the best player on the court? Maybe not, especially with Mingo coming in, but there's no reason he can't be that second or third option after Freddie DeLeon or Yannick Konan-Niederhauser. And like you said, Javin Carter, he can shoot the 3-ball well. He can't make free throws for some reason. And his rebounding is actually surprisingly decent. And so maybe even if he doesn't start next year, maybe he's that 6th man. Maybe he's the bring the energy guy, kind of like a Nick Kern Jr. for Penn State. Obviously, different position. But I think Penn State is in a good spot. You mentioned Eli Rice. People forget about Eli Rice because he played 5 minutes all season. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you can't give him a fair chance to say, oh, he's good, he's bad or not. You just don't know. he was okay before he came to Penn State. He had decent scouting report. I think he was a 3-star. But he could be like a glue guy for Penn State going forward. He'll be one of the older guys on the team. He'll be a junior next season. And Penn State could really utilize him, especially his defensive ability. And so, like you mentioned, like it's not like they don't have talent going forward. How good will that talent be? How will they develop? Mike Rhoades has proven to be a good development coach. For some reason, they've struggled coaching in the regular season. We'll have to see what goes forward, obviously, but that goes without saying. So Penn State, though, is in a good spot. You said there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
Can Penn State make the Big Ten tournament next year? Maybe March Madness next season? I think that's a possibility. They had that chance this year. Injury bug and a few other reasons, maybe some coaching issues led to their downfall this season, but they're right back in it next year, especially if guys like Kayden Mingo and Mason Blackwood can fit in right away and make an immediate impact.
And still to come on this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions, why does Penn State keep losing these close games? What went wrong for this team over the course of this season? And is there any chance that they get to the Big Ten tournament or the NIT? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Roy. Attention Nittany Lion fans, the future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they care about. Now, with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Penn State athletes, your other favorite schools of yours, in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose what player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and you'll receive exclusive content from the athletes that you back. And if the player transfers, you'll get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Penn State or your other favorite school's athletes the way that they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, there's no health exam required. You'll get peace of mind. As a parent, you want to make sure that your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric will give you that peace of mind. Affordable coverage. You can get millions of dollars in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. And this goes beyond life insurance. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That is meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Well, let's dial it back to the present. So we started to talk about what were the issues of this team. Were they coaching? Were they chemistry? Were they, I think a lot of things. I think you got to start with the injuries. And does Penn State even have a chance? So that's what we're going to address to wrap up this podcast. Is they're technically not out of it, but I've already gone on the record and said that they really don't have much of a chance because it is Maryland, it is Wisconsin, and you don't control your own destiny. But what I feel it's fair to rehash what went wrong with this Penn State men's basketball team this season when expectations were so high within the program, within the local beat reporters, Penn State media, and college basketball experts. It wasn't just, oh, well, they're Penn State reporters, they're going to be slightly biased. That we were all seeing the same thing when they beat up on Purdue to start the season, and Purdue's still a ranked team that expects they probably have goals to get to at least the Sweet 16, the Elite 8. And Penn State, same thing. They blew out Nebraska. That is a bubble team. So it was there, it just never came together. Eli Rice was injured. That's a guy that just gives you, 15 to 20 minutes off the bench if you really need him to, a three-point shooter, some defense. Ace Baldwin, and Puff Johnson, who were the glue guys of this team. Out of all the players you could have afforded to lose, those were the last two. They were your best players. And no, they didn't lose Ace Baldwin, but him not being 100% just showed how thin this team was. And that was it. I think at the end, the core issue was depth. This team had a blueprint. They were going to execute that blueprint. And the second that they lost a key player and couldn't do what they wanted to do, that's when it started to fall apart. And then they were close. And then they were close again. And then they were also close again. Oh, and then close another time. And then over time, that just built up. And that's going to demoralize any college roster. Heck, that's going to demoralize a pro roster. So even though this was a senior-laden team, the veteran experience was some of the best in the Big Ten, arguably the country. And yeah, if you don't, so that's on coaching. It's all of it. It's coaching, it's depth, it's just bad luck from the injuries, and chemistry too. I think that at some points in time, you noticed that there was kind of don't necessarily want to say a bit of a power struggle, but trying to figure out the way that the backcourt was going to operate between Freddie DeLeon, Ace Baldwin, Nick Kern, and you didn't really have anything after that, kind of like last season. I'm not sure how Penn State got away with it because they dealt with the same problems. They were actually, it seemed like they were better a season ago than they were this season, even though they looked stronger. But they had similar issues when Kanye Clary was with the team. There was just kind of, okay, how does this all fit together in the backcourt? So I think a fresh start is going to be good for the program overall as far as the senior group. They did a lot of the heavy lifting to get the Mike Rhoades era up and running, but now it is time for Kayden Mingo and the rest of them. So as far as Penn State men's basketball making the postseason, I don't expect them to get invited to the NIT, the National Invitational Tournament. They should not be invited to the NIT. This is a team that was 1-9 against quad one teams. They were not good this season, despite all of those circumstances. Could they hang with some of the better teams? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, winning teams win games, and they only 1-9 against quad one, 4-3 I think against quad two, if I'm not mistaken, and they're in the bottom three right now, Zane. And hypothetically, yes, if everybody loses all three of those remaining games that they still have, and Penn State happens to upset both Maryland and Wisconsin, which their ceilings are Elite Eight, the deck's stacked against them. I don't see them getting into the Big Ten tournament. At this point, I don't know that it's even worth their while if they somehow get in. I think the season should just be wrapped up and they focus on this future and get a head start on the transfer portal because next year's group is not bad.
I agree with you. They should just start focusing on development for next year. You mentioned Wisconsin and the remaining games. They're 1.5 games out of that final Big Ten spot. And so you're saying you have to win both games and everyone else has to lose. It's not great favors. And so maybe in those final games, maybe you give some more minutes to likes of Dominic Stewart, Javin Carter, Miles Goodman to see what their flashes could be for next year. Obviously, we don't know health of Goodman because he's only played sparingly minutes, but you could start the development now. Like you said, NIT. Yeah, I don't think they make the NIT either. Just
maybe the tournament does invite them, but I don't see them as the next best group of 16 after that group of 64. Or 68 technically, Zane. I don't see them being in that next group. They just didn't have it this season.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of that comes down to coaching, and you can't be. They lost so many games in the final few minutes, and that's a coaching thing, veteran leadership thing, and they had veteran leadership, so that leaves coaching. So there's a lot of things. Penn State, like you said, it'll be nice to have a fresh restart, some younger guys next season, and Penn State's trending in the right direction. I still think Mike Rhoades is the guy for this program. I think he hit some bumps and had some learning curves of his own that he had to go through.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think they're going to be better next year. And bringing a guy like Kayden Mingo, as we keep mentioning, really is that good of a player to turn a program around.
He can be the face of the team. He should be the face of the team next year. And it's about keeping the core together. Make sure that, because just as much as we talk about Penn State bringing players in from the transfer portal, Absolutely, players can leave as well. Miles Goodman is far away from home. He's all the way on the West Coast. And I'm not trying to allude to anything, but just know, I will say, if there's any player that should be circled as a concern, because there is tampering. There is rampant tampering. And programs are going to look at Yannick Konen-Niederhauser and say, what can we do to get him on our team? The SEC is not afraid to throw. Look at what BYU just offered for a top basketball prospect. There might be a program that sees Yannick Konen-Niederhauser as an All-America center because he started to play like that down the stretch, where they make an offer he can't refuse, and then who knows from there. And you're allowed to do that because the NCAA doesn't do anything to stop it.
Yeah, definitely. They got to keep their pieces. Yannick Konen-Niederhauser. I think Freddie Dilion is another name people need to keep watching, just because it seemed like he was in and out of the rotation there. Like, does he get along with Mike Rhoades? I don't know. But I think he's another name to watch going forward. Maybe, like you said, Miles Goodman, Yannick Konen-Niederhauser. And I think you keep around a lot of your other players, and Javon Carter, Dominic Stewart. And so, is Penn State in a bad position? If that happens, yes. But Pat Kraft is committed to this basketball program. He's committed to Mike Rhoades. Seems like the NIL is trending the right direction. Can they match like a $3-4 million offer if Yannick Konen-Niederhauser gets that?
Oh man, that kind of money. Oh,
probably not. But
if that's the market for a center, I guess the market's the market. I wasn't expecting that, but holy smokes!
Depends on the need. If he's that final piece to take a team, from an Elite Eight to a championship contender.
I suppose, yeah.
Say the market can be anything anymore with NIL. So Pat Kraft, though, is committed to Penn State, and I think they can make competitive offers for some of these players. And it does help. They have a lot of young guys who haven't really shown flashes of being elite that are going to demand a lot of money. So
he is Zane Brancefield, Penn State men's basketball correspondent to the podcast, also covers the team for Penn State Rivals. His work will be down in the description. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. If you're new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around Penn State men's basketball and Penn State football and wrestling as well. Zane, as always, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate the perspective on this Penn State basketball team.
Thank you.
And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On College Basketball with hosts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed on college basketball right now. You can find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.